A film producer has recently claimed that she has spoken with a number of executives that deal with superhero films and claims that they don't actually believe in superhero fatigue and that the problem is that their IP isn't universal enough. Before we get into this, I'd like to ask you please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Joining me on the Trent Report to discuss this is our good friend, Culture Casino. How are you doing,
It's
sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me today.
It's good to have you here. And let's get into this here. So, this is over at thatparkplace.com.
Ooh.
We have a film producer. Her name is Priyanka Matoo. And she posted this on X saying, I regret to inform you that I've now had multiple conversations with studio executives who still don't believe in superhero fatigue. They legitimately think the problem is that their IP isn't universal enough. As predicted, they think Barbie was about the doll. So, what do you make of what she's saying here?
I think it's encouraging that we're starting to hear some truth from people who work in the industry. So, especially when she's referring to what's happening at the upper levels. I think that she's pointing out the disconnect in Hollywood, specifically there at Disney. Um, with what actually resonates with the people who consume their products. I think that's amazing, truly.
Yeah, what do you make of when she says that they legitimately think the problem is that their IP isn't universal enough? Obviously, I think she's being a little cheeky there, or maybe not cheeky, but she's using some like coded language, I guess is the term that they like to use, uh, where it's like that kind of representation agenda that we've heard from a number of people over at Marvel and Disney, where it's like if we're not representing people, we're leaving money on the table. So in order to be actual universal, we have to represent all of these different cultures, whereas that's kind of the opposite of universal. Is universal is usually telling a singular story that anyone can kind of relate to rather than trying to have to go to different culture segments and represent them in order to kind of make it universal.
Oh, I think it's dripping with sarcasm, John. You can pretty much tell that she's she's calling out the fact that we don't have anything that's timeless. We're not producing things that anybody can glom onto. We're only appealing to certain niche groups which are working against us as being universal. So she's saying exactly that in the most facetious way what some of the problems are here. I think this entire tweet is telling. This looks like somebody who's a probably a very masterful writer, or at least grasps broad concepts and deals with them well. So
Yeah, so to your point, she did share this in a subsequent post, mocking mocking the studio executives, questioning why would anyone listen to what the audience wants. And then obviously, like it's using kind of like a feminist meme, but it makes the same point, right? Women are like audiences are so hard to read. Well, well, actually, we just want. And then the studio executive, obviously the guy in the top hat here, such complex creatures those audiences. If you just listen, so mysterious, can't understand.
the meme says it all, but it's so very true. I mean, they aren't listening to their customers. They're not listening to. It doesn't matter if they're not listening to anybody, whether it be gender based or whatever. Because if you talk to anybody in the industry, they recognize what the problems are. It's just the executives who are pushing what they're pushing don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear that their ideas are actually the things that are causing all this stress and harm to, you know, their end goal, their projects. So it's amazing.
Yeah, so I actually think she's right. I think that especially when she says she's talked to these studio executives and they don't actually believe in superhero fatigue, I think she's absolutely right on that point because I think we've heard from a lot of these studio executives, at least over the course of the past 2, 3 years, where they seemingly indicate that there is no such thing as superhero fatigue. It has more to like there. It has more to do with like how they're doing their productions, as we'll get to with like Bob Iger and his excuses that he gives for the Marvels. But before we get to that, like we had this from Victoria Alonso. She did an appearance at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures Outfit Legacy Awards, and she says diversity and inclusion is not a political game for us. It is 100% a responsibility because you don't get to have the global success that we have, given the Walt Disney Company. without the support of people around the world of every kind of human there is. So this is like that universal idea that she's talking about, right? And like you have to have those like representations, you have to have that diversity and inclusion in order to basically make money through
Hollywood,
these
Holly,
films.
yeah, I mean, and this is again, she really hasn't. She's one of the most disconnected people ever. She had a position invented for her at Disney just so that they could, put her somewhere, and then eventually found a way to get rid of her, which kudos to them. But look, Hollywood has always had broad appeal globally. Whether or not the story included what do they call it, diversity, equity, inclusion, which I call um, well, I'm not going to get into that, but die has always been there. Since Iger started to force it in with all of his hires and all of their ideologies. But that we'll set that aside. Hollywood has always had a broad appeal. We've always had films go global. I mean, Star Wars was a global phenomenon. Indiana Jones was a global phenomenon, and until they started to fiddle with it and add all of these political games in there, they were fine. They had universal appeal because of all the things we mentioned before. You have a timeless story with characters that anybody could identify with. Male, female, didn't matter. I mean, who would have identified with a pair of robots, would you think, in 3PO and R2, right? Because
Right.
those are the everyman that are traveling through every single Star Wars story. Every one. And that's one of the things that Disney got very wrong in the most recent sequel trilogy is they really did bury some of the most important characters in the background, and they never put those most important characters together again because it was going to go against their messaging. And this the same is true for Marvel. I mean, the very idea that they were going to push forward with A Force was something that they telegraphed in several scenes in the last two films that they put together that were successful, Endgame and the other one that I don't care about.
Infinity War.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I look at Marvel and you see that they had universal appeal. That's how they built their entire brand, right? You had Iron Man, and what is the universal appeal to that? It has a really good theme, and that theme is that he's his pride, right? He thinks his ego is so over the top. He doesn't think that he can really do any wrong. He's using up. He like uses women. He like is enjoying the party life and everything like that. And he is severely humbled when he is kidnapped and captured and basically enslaved and realizes what's going on with his company and everything like that. And he sets out to actually change what's happening there. He has this massive change in character, realizes what he's doing is wrong. Obviously, his personality is still kind of that bombastic, charismatic view, but he also does indeed like starts engaging in a monogamous relationship with Pepper Potts, etc. And he literally is like kind of like uh getting self-discipline to overcome all of these like character defects. Meanwhile, he's also facing the external threat, which is the Ironmonger. And so that like you obviously have that timeless message there of like overcoming your pride and ego through self-discipline and gaining all of these benefits and things like that. And obviously the external conflict. You see that also, I think, with Captain America, where what's the timeless message there is to always be courageous, always be fearless in the face of true evil. And you get that when you have that theme where it's like I can do this all day long, even when he's getting the absolute crap beat out of him. He
yeah.
continues to fight no matter what, because he knows what is true and right. And that's obviously a timeless message. It doesn't matter how much you're beat down. These people are telling you that you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. No, you know what is right. You know what is right. And you're going to continue to fight for that. And obviously, he gets rewarded for that at the end, gets the super serum, and he's able to really be a man of action. And similar to the Thor film, right? There's the he's also punished by Odin in that for his pride, his ego. Thinks he's like a know-it-all. Thinks he can do
Mhm.
it better than Odin. By the end of the film, he's telling Odin like, Odin's like, you will actually make a great leader. I'm like, you've done a great job. Like you've realized a lot of these mistakes that you made. And he's also gained humility too. And he's just like, I don't know. I think there's a lot more I can still learn. And then they obviously clearly kind of abandoned that in subsequent Thor movies. But those were timeless stories, and that's
Yes.
what built the MCU to what it is, and that
Well,
created those kind of like that they were universal, and that's why you had this broad global appeal.
but see, that's the core of all of the moral stories that are being told, whatever the moral of the story is, or and the moral growth is, the capacity for growth, the ability to change and become better. That's a through line with all of the great comic stories that you and I both appreciate, and all of these wonderful films up until, again, Disney started to inject all of this other kinds of messaging. So, the capacity for growth doesn't exist in a character like Ray Palpatine. It doesn't exist for characters like I mean,
Captain
there's a
Marvel.
list of them. I mean, just you can go through it. But most of the recent characters that they've introduced, especially the ones that they've brought in, they don't demonstrate any capacity for growth. There's no journey. Remember the hero's journey? It doesn't always have to be, an actual journey from place to place. It can be a journey of self and a journey of growth, and that's what that is. But no Ray, no Captain Marvel. No, I mean, you can go through a list of all these characters that didn't have to change. They were just handed everything, and it's why in our parlance we regularly use the term Mary Sue. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly. And then you have this here too from Victoria Alonso. She says the reason we have that success consistently is because our audience is global. You cannot have a global audience and not somehow start to represent it. It was really, really, really important to have that again. So this is just evidence, I think, that these studio executives are actually bought into this idea that it's not superhero fatigue. It's not the storytelling that they have a problem with. It's that they're not creating this global representation narrative enough, and they're going to keep doubling down on that. We have Bob Iger. He has made similar comments as well. This is when he came back as CEO. He did this whole like town hall conference where he says this company has been telling stories for 100 years, and those stories have had a meaningful, positive impact in the world. And one of the reasons they've had a meaningful, positive impact is one of our core values is inclusion, acceptance, and tolerance. And we can't lose that. We just can't lose that. Interestingly, that core value was something that he instituted and I think was actually
right.
finally enacted when Chapek put it in. They had like their little keys. And
Yeah,
I
the
think they
fifth
added
key.
that
Yeah,
key. Yeah, they
yeah,
added that key when he
yeah.
was CEO. So it's like he's just gaslighting his own company in town hall
Well,
here. It's
and
like
and
this is
if
our
and,
core
and if
value. And it's like,
and,
no, it's
and
not.
and if any company has now had a recent history of intolerance, it would be the Disney company.
Yeah, can you elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, not just with their oh gosh, their forced learning systems that they introduced that Christopher Rufo exposed,
Yeah, Reimagine
with
Tomorrow,
Reimagine
Stories
Tomorrow.
Matter.
Yeah, and their seeming contempt, and again, this is anecdotal, but their seeming contempt for people of certain religious faiths. I mean, Disney is now, and it's never been, but it is now a place where they don't respect the other people that work within the building unless they agree with them. It's almost like they have a you will adhere with our theology, our corporate theology. I'm going to put it that way. Or we will find a way for you to be removed. So
Yeah, and that comes through in their storytelling, right? I mean,
yeah,
we see that. How are they promoting the Marvels? This is a movie made for women, but like
yeah.
we're seeing studio executives need it to be universal, but then they're saying that
It's
it has this narrow appeal, and it's like
it's
they're
made by
caught in this like
women. It's made by women for women, and we're gonna make all the men look exactly as we do ever since we started pushing these narratives. We're gonna make the men look dumb. We're gonna, turn Thor fat. We're gonna do a lot of these things that cast men in the worst possible light. And look, I mean, anybody who pays attention and looks at it with those simple filters on when they watch it will come to the realization that Disney isn't a family company. It's not a moral company. It's not even it's not even a good company anymore. The and it that's there's it the fish stinks from the head down. Let's just put it that way.
100% agree on that fact. But I will say, I think some of their thinking is this has universal appeal because it's all about women, and women make up more than 50% of the entire global population. So it's appealing to all women across the globe. When it's like,
Yeah.
no, this appears to like a super niche minority, yeah, in like the United States and like Western Europe
Like with
that have like
anything,
bought into feminism.
yeah, like with anything, John, I would assert that they believe in a very myopic, reframed, and new definition of the word universal. And I think their idea of universal is just with the people who agree with us. That's their idea of universal, and that's across the board in everything that they're doing. I don't think anybody can argue that.
I agree. They like to play these word games. They like to change definitions of words, and this is probably something to that. I think this when she's describing it as like they want this want it to be universal. I think it's in the vein of the representation agenda, in the woke agenda that the Walt Disney Company is trying to, what, in lack of a better term, evangelize to the globe.
Yeah.
So we obviously there's a lot more in here that Iger says that I think backs up this idea. Like he's made a lot of different comments here, like at the New York Times Book Summit. But I do want to offer a different perspective here because obviously I think there's lots of evidence that this woman might have been talking to executives at Marvel or the Walt Disney Company, potentially at Sony as well, because they obviously are kind of in bed with Marvel as far as like with Spider-Man and things like that. Obviously they're still doing their Spider-Verse stuff, but I still think they're kind of somewhat aligned there. But we do have a little bit of a different perspective here, and that's from DC Studio CEO James Gunn. He actually did say in an interview with Rolling Stone, I think there is such a thing as superhero fatigue. But then he went on and said, I think it doesn't have anything to do with superheroes. And he says it has to do with the kind of stories that get to be told. And if you lose your eye on the ball, which is character, we love Superman, we love Batman, we love Iron Man because they're these incredible characters that we have in our hearts. And if it becomes just a bunch of nonsense on screen, it gets really boring. And I think that gets to back what we were talking about. The reason why we really love Iron Man, Thor, Captain America is because we get to see their actual moral character, their moral fiber on display in those first phase 1 movies and how they grow as people. Obviously Iron Man, Thor have a different character. They actually like have character growth, whereas Captain America is already that way, right? um, but
Yeah, I mean, he's already born with that strong moral fiber. I still think probably of the first phase films, Iron Man 2 was where we saw a character get the most developed. Um, I mean, perhaps the first Thor film has that same kind of thing, but he's 100% right. And you're 100% right. The reason that we love these characters is because they're good characters. They're out there. Everything about them we know firsthand. It's been shared with us. And that's why, again, a lot of these, instantly capable female characters are rejected because they don't give them the same kind of growth cycle that the male characters got in the first phase. I also find it
Thor's a
particularly
perfect
telling.
example of that, right? Because he is kind of like the Mary Sue. He's like this all-powerful guy. We get this really fun scene of him on Jotunheim, basically wrecking all of the Jotuns, and
Yeah.
then his character journey is being humbled by Odin. He's like,
Yes.
you need to learn you need to learn that there's our responsibilities that come with being a leader, becoming a king, and you have to like figure out how to do this without all of your powers and abilities and all of those things. And that's really kind of the journey he goes on. Whereas like Ray never has that. She never has that happen to her. She's never humbled. She's always
Yeah.
had that. She gets increasing powers as it goes on to solve the problems.
Now, just for fun, as a thought experiment, real quickly, John, and I know this is a tangent, but when I read the statement and he's talking about Superman, Batman, the third option here should have been Wonder Woman because it's DC. So if I were of a particular political bent, I would be yelling at James Gunn because he didn't say Wonder Woman there because he didn't mention any women in his statement. I'd be upset about it. Anyway.
I get where you're coming from there. I'm not too upset about him. I think that it's totally fine with Superman and Batman and Iron Man, because I do think those are probably the three most prominent male superhero characters out there right now.
which
Obviously, you can.
which I'm sure you will agree, Spider-Man would have been the natural choice were
Yeah,
it not
Spider-Man.
for the MCU. Because again, Iron Man was a C level character,
Yeah,
tier
see,
character, right? And even though I loved Iron Man from the very earliest years, because I inherited comic books from well, much earlier than I was born, and so I was introduced to Iron Man in a great way. But yeah, I mean, normally you'd see Spider Man there. It's one of the reasons why I think it's so telling how powerful the cinematic universes are in defining what the modern superhero is and became. Anyway, that's another tangent. Sorry. All right.
Yeah, I mean, just to go off on that tangent a little bit here, I do think that Spider-Man is still probably up there. It's just maybe not top of mind because of the MCU and just how great a performance Robert Downey Jr. did as Iron Man, as well as I think the storytelling they had with Iron Man. A lot of the movies that he was in were actually pretty well crafted for the most part. I think Iron Man 3 obviously had a little bit of that female girl power stuff where they have Pepper Potts come in and save him and all that other stuff, stealing his heroic moment, beating I can't even remember the guy's name right now. The fire powers blank.
Well, he
Blanking on
was
his
a
name.
replacement of the Mandarin. He was the
Yes.
replacement Mandarin. Not even both.
Yeah.
What's funny is we've had two fake Mandarins.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had two
Um,
in one movie. Anyway,
So he did go on and say this. He says, "But I get fatigued by most spectacle films by the grind of not having an emotionally grounded story. It doesn't have anything to do with whether they're superhero movies or not. If you don't have a story at the base of it, just watching things bash each other, no matter how clever those bashing moments are." Uh, Maybe he's talking about Black Widow there, where she smashes her head on the desk, and that's how she solves the problem. It's like it's because it's just that's just what instantly comes to my mind when
let
he's
me
saying that.
kill the nerve in my head so that I'm not affected by this pheromone.
Yeah,
What?
yeah. No matter how clever the designs and the visual effects are, it just gets fatiguing. And I think that's very, very real. And I think he's 100% on point here. If you don't have a really good, solid story, no matter how much like giant third act battle sequences you have, no one cares because you don't have um, that story that's driving to that climactic battle. And I think that's one of the reasons why Avengers Endgame uh, did falter a little bit. Obviously, you do get the culmination, and that's I think why it is really good because you have this what like 20 films leading up to the fight against Thanos there. But overall, the story in general in that film by itself struggled with all the time travel and all of that stuff. And it's like, what is even going on here? And then you get that fight sequence, and it's like if you look at that outside of the rest of the MCU, I think it fails in that, and it's a perfect example of what James Gunn is talking about here. But it works because it's in the 20 years of storytelling that builds up to it.
Yeah, and they actually really I think in a larger with a larger view, stepping back away and viewing it with a wider lens, they really did waste all of that buildup and even that last film because that was the perfect point to start to redefine what the MCU would be going forward and to take advantage of all those previous stories told. But they never did that. You know, they never did.
I think we're going to leave it there. I think that's a good point to leave it there. Because I think you're 100% right. I mean, that's just wow. It's so simple. Yeah, it's so obvious, right? So thank you so much for joining us. Glad for your commentary. Always a pleasure to have you on the Trent Report. Where can people find you? Obviously on your YouTube channel, but
Yeah.
anywhere else?
Yeah, actually, you can find me obviously on Culture Casino, but you can find me on Twitter, Minds Getter, I don't know, all kinds of places under Culture Casino. You can also find me on That Park Place and on Midnight's Edge and on Mr. H Reviews and on WDW Pro. I'm lots of places. If you can't find me, I can't help you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we will definitely have you back sooner rather than later. Now we leave it to you guys. Let me know what you guys think about what's going on with these studio executives and their thoughts on superhero fatigue. Leave a comment in the comment section below, and remember to always be charitable, but to always speak the truth.